All right. All right. All right. I think that we're live.
I can't tell because it does. Okay, it did
All
say
right.
starting, but
All right. We started. We live, baby. We are live in living color. Noah Lyric, come over here. All right, baby. Let's get started. In the name of God, the compassionate and the merciful, all praises be unto you, O God, the Lord of the worlds, the compassionate and the merciful, master of the day of judgment. It is you who we worship. It is from you that we get our help. Guide us on the straight path, the path of those who thou hast blessed, not those who have incurred your wrath, or those who have been led astray. God, we thank you for being God. Here we are. It is a special edition of the Ubuntu Fellowship Assembly. My wife is joining us today. As hey, y'all give it up for my wife. Woo woo!
thank you.
You know, I got the kids clapping in the back. Y'all can go ahead and give your mother a clap.
Thank you.
Indeed, indeed. All right, you know I had to. We got to represent today.
Mm.
We got to represent today, baby. I told her, I said, baby, I said tonight at 8 o'clock. I said I need you to go ahead and join me. I said I want you with me because the title of today's message is walking in oneness in marriage, and if I'm a Commander fan, that means you're a Commander fan. Don't do me like that. But
I'm more of a basketball fan than football.
you won't be watching that either.
Not anymore, but I remember watching it growing up with Will, my brother.
Indeed. Family, thank you all for joining us. As you know, this past Friday, my wife and I celebrated 14 years of marriage, 17 years altogether. So I was just like, oh my goodness. I said, in the next 3 years, I've been knowing you half my life. Ain't that something? Well, we've known each other half our lives. So it is, yeah, I wanted to do this. We've done this before. And every now and again, I think it's good. And I've said this to my wife. I said, I think that it's a good thing for the people to see you as well. People, y'all already know how I sound like y'all, give the people something different, and I've told my wife this before. I said, Ubuntu Fellowship Assembly does not operate without you. And God had specifically told me when I started up this online ministry that you are intended. You are intended not only for me, but for the outreach that we will do. And so I felt like it was important that we show ourselves today as a couple. And I think that one of the biggest things that's happening right now is that there's a lot of couples that are discouraged. Um, there's a lot of people that are married, a lot of people that are looking to be married, and a lot of folks that have been married around the same time frame, 14, 12, 13 years. A lot of people are struggling. A lot of people are struggling to get along. A lot of people are struggling to, because we're really we're approaching the mid age, and there are things that are changing. Parents are getting older. Different types of family roles are having to be assumed. Then, if you're like us, I was 23 and my wife was 22 when we got married. So it was navigating, learning how to be an adult, learning how to be in our careers, learning how to be a parent, and then navigating changing. Everything changes. How you view the world changes, how you see life changes, and truly learning how to give each other grace for real. And I there's no, and I want to start off by saying this. We're just being transparent today because that's what God laid on my heart to do. I'm no expert. We ain't no love doctors out here. We're still learning. That's the thing about love. Love is constantly evolving, maturing, I would hope that I don't have the same maturity now that I had when I was 23. And so that means being honest with yourself and being honest with your shortcomings and being honest with areas that you feel like you need to grow in. Operating in oneness. Operating in oneness. So I was sharing with my wife last night. I said, this whole thing with Ubuntu, it feels like an epiphany, beloved, because a lot of you all may know already that I've been on this spiritual journey for a while. And somebody asked me, they said, D, what is it that you get from studying religion and spirituality? I mean, what does it do for you? It doesn't pay your bills, and they were being kind of snarky with it. And I said, the importance of it is identity, knowing who you are, because a lot of times how we view life, how we view God, it runs deep to the very core of us. And Ubuntu means I am because we are. So that means that I don't have a self-driven motive, that I truly learn to walk in oneness. And the only way that you walk in oneness is by really uh, uh, um, grabbing a hold of empathy. And empathy is different from sympathy in the fact that empathy means I can put myself in your shoes and I can see things from your perspective. And so walking in oneness means truly maintaining a state of grace. Grace means that I don't react. I allow patience to take place regardless of the circumstance. And learning how to see things from each other's perspective is huge, especially in the long haul with marriage. Um, you're not always going to feel like kissing and hugging and all that, it's it's a commitment. Love is a choice. You feel me? You're not going to always, sometimes you're going to be upset with each other. Sometimes you're not going to feel like talking. And I believe that it's important. I believe that this is important for us to talk about, because I think that a lot of people like the whole wedding aspect, but they don't really want to do the real work of marriage. Um, in marriage, anything of value requires you to put in effort, you know? Honey, what do you think about oneness? I mean, how do you view oneness as far as, because I know I've been teaching you this thing as it's been coming to me as
Right.
well. Yeah.
I would definitely agree with what you said as far as in marriage, having to adjust and sometimes even make sacrifices as far as um, certain things that you may want done a certain way. You're able to give grace when your husband or your wife doesn't do it that way. Um, I was going to add to what you were saying about the wedding part. I think it was maybe 2 nights ago we were watching a movie, and I had said, I think that movies and shows, television media gives a false perception of what marriage looks like.
I agree.
Um, Even from when we're little and we watch Disney movies, I know you and I both love that. That was one thing we had in common, was watching Disney movies. But you always see the princess, and she meets her prince, and then they run off and live happily ever after. But they don't show what exactly that means after you say I do, and how to become one. Is sometimes uncomfortable. It can be frustrating. There are happy feelings too, though. You get joy from seeing the other person happy or
Right.
engaging with them. But then there is a work that has to be done too that you don't see, I feel like, in movies. And it can set you up to feel like you're failing if that's not what you're experiencing in your own marriage and you see it on media.
Right. Right. Well, and someone else had said this. Social media is not real. It, it's a it's a curated, highly edited image that somebody puts out there for you to see. And I think sometimes you have to be careful, especially on social media, because you'll be looking at somebody else's marriage, looking at somebody else's relationship, and the appearance is as though they have it all together, or that
Right.
they're not enduring or going through any conflict or working through disagreements. Um, and I think that part of breaking generational curses, um, and when I say generational curses, family, I'm talking about patterns of behavior that go from one generation to the next. Patterns of behavior, patterns of thought that just get pushed from one generation to the next. And when you're talking about breaking generational curses and dealing with generational trauma, um, that's you're not going to see a post about that on social media, because that's ugly. That's really dealing with the ugly aspects of growth, development, being an adult. And so that's the reason why I was sharing, like, being married. It's like walking in oneness means that I constantly thinking about how are you being impacted, and you're thinking about how I'm impacted, and working hard to maintain a state of empathy, because I believe that our natural nature is we have an inclination towards selfishness. It starts at children and it works its way on. It follows us. There's this our lower nature. It's impulsive, it's reactive, and it's selfish. And so learning how to evolve beyond that and being and operating in love truly means being selfless, truly being selfless. And so in arguments that we've had, I think that one of the biggest things is truly that leads you into humility, because you can't reconcile unless you're willing to be humble. And the only way that you really reconcile is that you have to think about you have to approach it with empathy. Well, how did my words impact her? How did what I say or what I did, where's the accountability at? Am I willing to be accountable for what I did wrong, or for what I said, or how I said it? Sometimes it's not even what you say, it's how you say it. And I think that that's one of the big things, is learning how to deal with things that you like that I may not like. But if it brings you joy and it brings you peace, then okay, I'm for it. And I mean, this leads me into the next area that I want to talk about. One of the biggest things that people ask um, me, I don't know if they ask you, but you said that they've said it to you before. It's like,
Hmm.
Dietrich, you're a Muslim.
Not as much, probably, but
One of the big things is like, Dietrich, you're a Muslim and your wife is a Christian. Like, how does that work? How does that how does that work? And it's amazing to me, honestly, how many times I've been asked this question. And truth be told, if I can be honest with you, at first it didn't work.
oh,
At first it didn't work.
mm. All right now.
Hey, baby, I told you we was gonna be transparent. Um,
Oh.
Let me take my glasses off because there's a glare. At first it didn't work. At first it was there was conflict, especially when I first came into it, because I was really gung ho with it. When you find something new that brings you peace and everything, you're really gung ho about it. And I think at first you thought maybe it was a phase.
No, I didn't necessarily think it was a phase, but it was something brand new, unfamiliar.
Hmm.
Because when we met, we were both
Christian.
Christian,
I mean,
and
we were singing in a gospel group. We were traveling. I was traveling and I was ministering. So to go from, and that's the reason why I say a lot of times it's very fun at first when people get married. You know, that when you first get married, it's like bells and whistles. You know, it's nice. But we've been knowing each other 17 years, and so time will test if you truly are in love. I mean, nothing tests us like time, because you're not going to be the same person. You're not going to be the same person 5, 10, 15 years from now. You're just not. And there's no amount of premarital counseling that you can go through that's going to prepare you for the unknown. Because none of us know how we're going to respond to life and the adversities of life until it happens. And you don't even, if somebody had told me 15 years ago that I'd be sitting up here and be a Muslim, full out, alhamdulillah type Muslim, I would have laughed at them. I would have. At 15, 20 years ago, I would have laughed. I would have been like, no, Jesus is Lord. And I felt very strongly about it. I think, and one of the things that I have to give you credit for is I want to thank you for loving me through this, because I know that it has not been, it hasn't been easy, and I do appreciate you.
Well, I
Yeah.
think that we've loved each other through different things. Um, my husband Dietrich is obviously the more outgoing and transparent person, whereas I kind of like to keep things to myself or to family or close friends. But I admire that. I do admire that about my husband. He's very bold. Um, he is willing to share things to help people, and I think that you do a good job of trying to include me in that. So I do appreciate that. Um, but back to the loving each other part, I was just thinking of different health things we've gone through with health, physical, mental health. So I don't look at it as I'm just supporting you through your spiritual journey, because you also support me through other things.
Oh, I appreciate that, baby. You know, because it's been learning how to, because I was in a low place when I came to Islam. I was in a very low place. You saw it. Um, and even though I know that you don't understand everything with it, I do believe that I am a better man now than I was 3 years ago. And at the end of the day, and I've said this in a Facebook post some time ago, at my lowest, calling on Jesus didn't work for me. I mean, at my lowest, I called Jesus the same way I had when I was a child, and it didn't work for me. It didn't. I didn't get peace from it, and that's like a big change, because I remember when I did. I remember when I did get peace, you know, calling Jesus, and it was. Mm, I was in such a low place, and it just, I needed a name to call God by. And I called God Allah. And I felt peace. So what do you do with that? You know what I'm saying? You know, God knows I miss it. I miss church. I miss the singing. I miss my friends. I miss it. But I've always lived by the motto, I always want to be true to myself. Those of y'all who know me, even back to high school, I've always just been me. I ain't trying to be nobody else but me. And if being me makes you feel weird, I don't care. If being me makes you upset, or makes you want to poke fun at me, then so be it. That's your hang up, not mine. And it wasn't authentic for me. and I've always followed my heart and followed what was true. And so I think when I really started applying, the teachings of Islam to my day-to-day life, it has really changed my life. And so I know that God hears us in different religions. I'm not telling you something that I've read in a book. I'm talking about something that I've experienced. And I remember one time I asked my wife, I said, do you think that I'm going to hell? And I'll let you tell them what you said back to me.
Um, I know we had talked about it a little bit before, and I was trying to remember in that exact moment what I said, but um, I know I didn't answer yes. I know I didn't say yes. I thought that you would be going to hell. I didn't say that, but I can't remember exactly the wording that I used.
Mm-hmm.
But I did not feel that didn't sound like that didn't sound right to me to tell you because you are now Muslim. I didn't feel like I can say that. That has to come from only God, in my opinion, can judge and say who I would never try to tell someone that. But at the same time, I do still identify with Christian principles. Um, during Christmas time, um, this year we put up the tree, and I think one of the kids asked me about the birth of Christ, and I didn't feel like I can't talk about that just because you're Muslim, and we have different views on Christ, but we have the same view, I believe, on God, and we have the same view. I had wanted to read because I haven't been asked in person. My husband said he's been asked by people what I think, and I do struggle with not feeling like even if I'm not being asked directly, I have struggled to feel like, you know, by behind the scenes, am I being talked about, or
Right.
are people wondering, well, how does Kaja feel about this? So the only answer I had when you asked me earlier, I said I wanted to share. This is from 1 Corinthians 13:4-8, and of course, it's in the Bible. It says, "Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable, and it keeps no record of being wrong. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance." And so that's what I think about me being a Christian still, and you identifying as Muslim. For me, I said I do, and I made vows. We both made vows to
Right.
each other.
Right.
And I do believe that love never gives up and never loses faith and is always hopeful.
Right. And for me, I know that I truly have seen God, more specifically after I found Sufism, which is the uh, spiritual aspect of Islam, or tasawwuf as it's said in Arabic. And Sufism really brought oneness to the forefront for me. Um, I'm not even in a religious space like I used to be. This is not about religion for me where I'm at, and I tread light when I say that I'm a Muslim, because um, all these titles, Christian, Muslim, it divides us, and that was purposeful, I believe. And I ain't got time to go into that today, but all these different titles, all these different labels, Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, Muslim, it's I don't believe that God is that petty. I don't believe that God, because God is eternal, God was here before all these phonetics and words and language came into being. And I don't believe that God is dependent upon our language to respond or to give his children peace. You know, whatever name I have called God, God has met me. Even when I didn't call God at all. And one of the things that I had to work through, truthfully, in this journey is giving the space the same way you've given me space to be myself and to figure it out. Because no one else is responsible for your healing. Your spouse is not responsible for your healing. Your spouse is not responsible for your healing. Your spouse is not responsible for your healing. You have to be accountable for your own healing. And I think some of the conflict that we had to work through was me, just speaking for myself, not being accountable for my own hurt, for my own issues that I was refusing to address and deal with. And then it spills over into conversation and interaction in the home. And then it causes, friction. And so truly walking in oneness is I cannot walk in oneness with you until I have accepted and walked in oneness with myself. That means accepting the parts of me that are still broken. That means really sitting and dealing with the aspects of me that are in the shadows, the aspects of me that I don't even like to look at.
Well, I know you had mentioned earlier, and it was when we first started, and I see a few more have joined, but we got married very young. I mean, 22 and 23.
Right.
I look back at it now, and I feel like we were babies. After high school, it's like this big thing. Oh, I'm going to turn 18. I'm going to college, or
it's a timeline. It's like an expected timeline. The world puts this timeline on you, and if you're not, and that's the reason why, if you're in your late 30s and you're not married yet, don't be discouraged.
Right.
It's the biggest decision that you will ever make. Bigger than buying your first house, bigger than getting your first car, bigger than the first business that you start up. Who you get married to is the biggest decision that you will make, because either you're going to move forward, you're going to move backward, or you're going to stay stationary. But you will not be the same.
And you change as
you change.
grow. I mean, even if we had not gotten married at 22 and 23, we still would change.
Right.
We still would have changed and grown in different areas. And I think it's important to remember that the level of maturity to be married, I feel like we really had no idea at that age. But it's a beautiful thing at the same time, because you do get to grow together.
Mm-hmm.
And you can be an example to maybe other young married couples. But it was a lot of different changes, especially when we had Zoe, and then we had Donovan, and Noah came a few years later. So you had to learn how to not just be a spouse, you had to learn how to be a parent.
Right. And then our kids, they had some medical things that was going on with them, and that's another thing. Nobody prepares you for that either. When your kids have medical issues, and you're up late at night, you're losing sleep, and then there's an irritability. Irritability is high. Anxiety is high because you're trying to figure out what's going on with your child.
Right.
And then it's like we're trying to still have time for each other.
And you were nursing. You had just started nursing. Lord, I had just started in Richmond Public Schools.
Right. The trenches.
So I'm
the trenches.
Trying to say that with as much much reservation as possible. But the bottom line is, I was in Richmond Public Schools. and I had to learn how to navigate being a kindergarten teacher.
Right. It was rough.
Not just a kindergarten teacher, but I mean, that would be a whole different conversation. The things that teachers are expected to be able to do. But I got pregnant with Zoe my first year teaching. I mean, I was in the classroom with her in my belly, and she'd be kicking and punching and doing all kinds of things. And then I'm trying to come home and still be, like you said, still be a wife,
right.
you know. And I think that you can't expect things to be perfect. There is
And I
no
think
perfection.
one of the things that we had to learn was limiting conversations about work when we got home.
Right.
We had to learn how to do that. We had to learn how to shut it off. Because then whatever emotions and thoughts that were at the job now come into the home. And so that anxiety, that frustration, that depression, whatever emotion that you're experiencing, it now comes into your home. And God had to teach me this, that your home is your sanctuary. Uh, this is where we should have a place of peace, a place of fellowship, a place of harmony. And harmony doesn't mean that we're all the same. For my musical folks, harmony is a collection of different tones, different sounds. And so walking in oneness, back to what I was saying, was like truly owning my own mental health, dealing with my own issues. Anxiety and depression had gripped me really bad at one point.
Well, I think we both were going through that.
Right.
And I was going to add to what you were saying. I was always very introverted, very much to myself. And if anything was happening, I think this stemmed from childhood too. But I just kept it all in. And then I expected Deidre to be the ones that listened to it when I got home, or I felt like I didn't have an outlet or another person that I could really be vulnerable with. But you need that. You do need, if it's not a therapist or a best friend, a family member. I talk to my family a lot, so I don't want to make it seem that I didn't call them, because I did, especially my grandma when she was when she was here, be all times of the night, because he was working night shift when I was pregnant with Donovan and Zoe was 1. So I would call her and she would tell me to turn on TVN, and she'd be praying on the phone and
praise the Lord telephone.
Yes, she would always ask me. And but I look back at those memories now, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I had that relationship with her, and I also understand now that I think I had some expectations of you that were not always fair, because you don't want to come home and hear about, oh, so and so threw a chair today, and all the stories that I could that I could tell. But I think we both had to learn not to do that.
Both had to learn, because it's one thing to vent about some things, but if you're not careful, it will consume you. It will consume you, and then you go to bed, and then you're right back in the same environment that stressed you out.
Right.
So did you ever give yourself a break from what you're stressed out about? So you're responsible for what you allow to come into your home.
And we're still learning.
Still learning.
I started a new position this year, and I've had to. I think I would say I do better with that, with not expecting you to be the one to kind of take in all of what's happened to me. But it's still a work in progress. It's not something I feel like I've mastered, or because there have been times where I've still come home and I'll tell you about something that happened, and and then I'm sad about it, or I don't know how to quite move on right away. But
Right.
I think we've become more patient with each other too.
Well, I think we had to because, and that's also walking in oneness, patience, grace. And if I'm walking in oneness with you, then I'm the task of it is keeping myself mindful of your experience and you
Right.
doing the same for me. And that is what Ubuntu is. Uh, Beyond the God aspect of it. So we are all one. All of it, all creation, all that is God. And we are part of that allness. So I not only see Ubuntu as the allness and interconnectedness of all that is, but God had to tell me this in meditation. He said, you can see, God said it to me and it kind of struck me. It was like, you see Ubuntu in everything else except in your own marriage. And I was like, oh, because, when something comes to you, you know if it's true or not. And I was like, and I really sat and thought about it. I was like, I can see, because when it comes down to oneness, it's not a religion. It's an understanding. It's an awareness that I am interconnected with everything. All that is interconnected. And I can see that, and there is no time where oneness is not effective. If you look historically, whenever people come together as one in unity, they defeat evil. If we look at biology, all the components of that we have, we share the same stuff, the same
Mm-hmm.
periodic table of elements. When we look at the cosmos and we look at nature, everything is interconnected. All of it is one, and it just expresses itself in different manifestations. And so when I really see that, I'm like, we are one. And the Bible even talks about this. Um, and in the Quran, it talks about Tawheed, which means oneness, that God is one. But I see God not as a being, but as the interconnectedness of all that is. So I see God in you. I see God in me. And so walking in oneness means truly that I maintain a perspective where I see the God in you and I see myself in you. And then that gets reciprocated back.
Right. You have to definitely have to have a willingness. And I was gonna say, also finding ways to remain connected because, like you said, at first when you said you no longer wanted to be Christian, and then remember you talked to me about um, Allah a lot, and I remember at first I was pretty upset, and I even
Right.
would get angry. You would tell me there is no God, and but Allah, and okay, and then I'd be sitting there like, who is he talking to? But the reality of it, the reality of it was, I had to be willing to accept that you are calling God a different name. You are saying Allah. I think I had this perception of like, I don't know why Aladdin comes to mind and Jafar,
Oh, Lord have
but
mercy. The
and
turban.
please, I'm sorry if I'm not trying to be disrespectful to anyone of the Muslim faith, but in my mind, I was just like, well, am I gonna have to go through all these changes as far as covering my head and covering myself? Um, I know that some people kind of reached out to my family. It was
Messy.
showing say they were concerned, and I was just
Concern.
like,
Messy.
um,
I said, out of all this time, you ain't reach out for nothing else, but then you gonna reach out and gonna
I
ask
I don't know. We're
over a
gonna
change of
practice.
religion.
We're gonna practice Ubuntu and believe that they had the best interests. But needless to say, we have still had to find a way to connect. I know we
Right.
both always loved theater, and
Right.
he knows I love musical theater. I don't think you do as much, but you'll. go
I watch
along
a few. You
with
know what I'm
it.
saying? We watch the
Wicked.
Wicked. You know,
Hmm.
I tap into a few of them. They all right. And I think that it was just such a and one thing that God had told me, and remember, I don't know if you remember when I said this. I said God had laid on my heart. I said, God, how am I going to move forward? How am I going to be the man of my home? And I believe something different than my wife. You know, I really did. I went to God with that because it seemed like it was an obstacle. I knew it was true for me. I knew that it brought me peace. But I was like, God, how am I gonna do this? And God had said, all beings must choose. And I was like, He said, you cannot love if you do not give the freedom to choose. And so I never put any pressure on my wife to wear a hijab. Um, I don't eat pork, but if she chooses to eat pork, that's,
Yeah, I don't really.
you know, I did not want to put any requirements on her because, and there was a point in time where I was thinking about walking away from Islam, and then God keeps circling me back to it. So, in this place, in this stage in my life, this is what makes sense to me.
Right.
But Christianity makes sense to you, and it
I
brings
have
you peace. And I'm not
strong roots. I feel that
right.
I have strong roots in that, and that's what I grew up. And I mean, we
We
both
both did
did,
right.
but um, like you said, you what brings you peace may not necessarily what brings someone else peace.
Right.
But is am I willing to accept that we are different in some ways, but we do still have a lot in common and a lot
Right.
to keep us connected, and that's I think where what we really are focusing on now. Whereas
Right.
at first, when you said you must give everyone, say it again. I'm sorry.
All beings must choose.
All beings must choose.
Everyone must have the freedom to choose. So walking in unconditional love means that I operate in a space of not trying to control you.
Right, but
Right.
and when you first said it to me though, I didn't even want to hear that.
Right. I
I
remember.
was like,
I said, you know, God said to me that all beings must choose. You remember that?
I did.
And I said, God said that all beings must choose. And I said, I know God said that. And so I said, I don't want to control. What you doing?
You okay, Noah? Oh,
You're all right.
oh, honey, y'all go help him. So that's not funny. Hmm? But back to what you were saying about that.
What's going on?
When you said that, I was like, again, I was like, what did you say about choosing?
That
We all
everyone must be free to choose.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, no, they're not. you know, for me, I was like, there's only because you grow up with that. There's only one
Way
way.
to God and through Jesus and
So when you said
right.
it, yeah, I remember being angry. I was like, what is he talking about?
Right.
We must choose, but I can't say. I can honestly say I'm not in that same place that I was.
And I don't believe that God gets glorified in us being angry with our different frameworks of belief. And I don't believe that God is. We cannot say that God is all knowing, and in the same breath, don't think that God foresaw that people would differ on how they view Him. That God didn't foresee people having difference of belief and difference of opinion. And this is the reason why in the Quran, is my Quran up here? Did I bring it up here? The blue book, son.
Is it right there on the iron board?
Is it under your computer?
It's right there.
Yeah, that's what I'm
It's right there on the.
Right. And so in Surah 5:48, and I had shared this last week, one of the things that gave me peace when I did convert to Islam was Surah 5:48. And it says, we sent you the scripture with truth, confirming all the scripture that came before and protecting it. So judge between them according to what God has sent down. Do not follow their whims, which deviate from the truth that has come to you. We have assigned a law and path to each of you. So so if God had willed, he would have made you one community. In other words, we would have been believing the same thing, looking the same way, having the same thoughts and ideas. But God willed otherwise, to test you in the truth that has been given, and that to God we shall all return, and we will be informed in that which we differed about. I believe that. I believe that God foresaw that there would be differences of opinion and different frameworks of reference and belief. I believe that God foresaw that. We cannot say that God is omniscient, all knowing, and not and that God did not see that there would be differences of belief. And I believe that all roads eventually lead back to the Most High God. And when you come up, in such a Christianized country, it wasn't until I started fellowshipping with people from the mosque, and 9 times out of 10, you're going to be talking to somebody that's from outside this country or has roots outside this country. And one of the things that was said to me, especially by my African fam, they said, Dietrich, it's not abnormal for you to have a Christian Muslim marriage. It is not abnormal. And when somebody really affirmed that to me, they was like, I know in this country it gets shunned a lot, but they were saying that it's not abnormal, that a lot of people either they'll marry into a Christian family, but that doesn't mean that they sacrifice what they believe in. And so that means that coming to a true place of harmony where your worship to God may look different than mine, but we stand in oneness that there is one God. And so what we teach our children, and we're raising our children completely different than the way that we grew up. And I think now the reason why I'm hesitating is because, I don't want to sound like I have animosity towards the church. But, the framework of belief that I am sinful, that I'm born in sin and shaped in iniquity, and if I don't do this, then I'm going to hell, and if I do this, I'm going to hell. It's not healthy. And so we have chosen to teach how to be a good human being without relying on a religion to tell you to do so. One of the things I was telling my wife this morning, I said, one of the things that I love about you is that you accept people for who they are, where they are. And that matters a lot. That matters a lot to me because, when we serve others in the community, I don't have to worry about my wife turning her nose up at somebody that doesn't look, who may look different.
Right.
Well,
I think that's one of the things that drew us or made our relationship as strong as it was. We both could identify with being different, and I know for me, when I met you, I did feel like we had that in common. That I'm hesitating because I don't want to say too much, but I know what it felt like to be in certain situations that could be looked down upon and that could be judged as being less than. And so I never wanted anybody to feel like that, including you. I never wanted to make anyone feel less than.
Right. And if your theology does not lead you in a path of unconditional love, then you have the wrong theology. And love without conditions. So regardless of what name you call God, I know that God hears you. And it brings you peace. And I celebrate whatever helps you be healed. And I celebrate whatever helps bring you peace. And you've done the same for me. And so Sufism, like I had said, is the spiritual dimension of Islam. And the reason why I've said this before, and I'll keep saying it again, if it wasn't for Sufism, I probably would have walked away from Islam as well. because the space that I'm in now, I don't like tradition, blind faith, anything that makes you feel like you're less than. Religion has done a masterful job of doing that. I can connect to God without looking at myself as sinful. I can connect to God and do the work of growth and maturing without framing myself as a sinful human being that must need a savior to save me. And I mean, I'm not trying to sound too controversial here, but that's where I'm at. And so it's like this is about relationship. This is about relationship with God, and having a relationship with God forces me to have a healthy relationship with myself.
Well, and I was thinking as you were talking, I've had at least two instances where I've met people that encouraged me and uplifted me. And I remember one of them, she invited me to her church, and when I got there, she was titled as a minister, but she never once at any time outside of being at church, she never once held that held that over my head or exalted herself over others. I would have never known that she was a minister or a. I met someone else that they had the title of missionary or an evangelist. I think it's important that you show people, like you said, the unconditional love, and then that's showing them Christ. Or you
Right.
talked about that
And let me just
before.
say this: as a Muslim, we believe highly in the teachings of Yeshua, uh, Jesus. You cannot be. There's nothing wrong with the teachings of Christ. I believe if it wasn't for Christianity, I wouldn't know who God is. And so the teachings, I absolutely stand behind that. Loving your neighbor as yourself, learning how to have discipline, learning how to disagree with folks without going to war with them, walking in true unconditional love.
Yeah.
And so I do thank God for this because it has shown us that there's more to us than just religion. And like I said, I do thank God for you because I mean, I've heard people say that, if their husband had converted to another religion, that would be it for them, which, kind of blows my mind. Someone actually had said that there was my husband, uh, I can't be married to someone that isn't submitted to Christ. And um, it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that religion has become that divisive of a topic. That if your husband change, and this is stuff to think about, before you get married. Like, y'all might be believing the same thing now. What happens if there's a change in belief? Can your love survive calling God a different name?
I think it also depends on what comes with that.
Okay.
Um, like you said,
Right.
you didn't require me to
Right.
change
Right.
or put certain stipulations on what I could do or where
Right.
what I could wear. Um, I think also seeing the character of your character outweighs the change, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Like as a Christian or a Muslim, there's certain characteristics that you have, such as kindness, integrity, wanting to help others. So I looked at all of that in comparison to, oh, now, we don't believe the same or have the same faith as far as a name, but we have similar values. We still have those core values
And
together.
and to piggyback on that, those values, being kind, serving others, that's at the heart of Islam. You, you know, uh, being peaceful.
Right.
And that is a form of worship to God. Worship to God has nothing to do with posture, music, or songs. It has nothing to do with that. Worship is your whatever you commit your mind, will, and behaviors to. Okay? That is what worship is. And worship doesn't necessarily, I mean, we worship things that ain't God all the time by what we give our will, emotions, and our behaviors to. And so I choose to having those character traits, which I believe that you have as well. Religion, so moving from a place of religion to spirituality means I'm moving away from tradition and I'm moving into a way of being. I am kind. I am generous. I am humble.
Right.
Um, I am respectful.
Right.
You know, uh, this brings you into alignment with the inner divine that is within you. So there is God dwells within you. Okay, whoever may be watching this, know that God dwells within you. We cannot say that God is omnipresent and God is not present in all things and in all people at all times, in all things. So you carry God within you. You also carry devil within you as well. So navigating the space in between the two impulses, because we have, and Christians, they call this our carnal or our sinful nature. But I have learned that sinful is just a word that we've given to anything that does not operate at our highest self. Okay? And learning how to do that in marriage, because not everything is going to be great. I know walking in oneness, I said I wanted to share this and then we got to get up off here. We've been on here for a
I was
while.
gonna say,
Friday, something simple like I was coming home and and my wife said she was going to make chicken Alfredo. Well, I had already used the Alfredo sauce for another meal earlier. So we ended up, I ended up trying to find something in the pantry because, I was home. I didn't feel like going back out. And working through, she had it in her mind that she was gonna make that chicken Alfredo.
Well, and then I think I had, because I had gone grocery shopping earlier in the week, and I remember I had even said to you, I was like, I got Alfredo sauce and all, whatnot. And so I didn't, when it came down to using it and it wasn't there, I was just like, well, haven't I been talking about making this? But it was used for something else.
Right, it was. And so we ended up making chicken and rice. And I kind of talked her through what I was going to do. But, that was a test in oneness right there because, I generally don't like nobody else in the kitchen with me. But, we worked through it and we made the chicken and rice. And so that's a small example of the unexpected is going to happen. Change is going to happen. What you doing? Anyway, things are going to happen. Change is going to occur. I hope that what we have shared today, I hope that God gets the glory with what we've shared here today. Again, we're not experts, but wanted to provide you a little bit of transparency to those who are married, newly married, thinking about getting married. It can be a task, but I want to encourage you to really walk in oneness in all areas of your life. Come into alignment, come into agreement. That's what oneness means. Oneness isn't sameness. It doesn't mean that you have to be the same as me. I just have to be in agreement with you, in alignment with you. At the end of the day, I want what's best for you and you want what's best for me, because I can see God in you and you can see God in me, and I can see myself in you and you can see yourself in me. And so really walking in oneness is being in alignment with yourself, being real with yourself. Again, your spouse is not responsible for your mental health. We are all responsible for our own healing, okay? And when you start doing the inner work, then it makes it easier for y'all to walk in oneness. Because I'm not expecting you to be my counselor, my therapist, my doctor, my social worker. I just want you to be my wife. And I think at one point in time, because your spouse is the easiest person to trust, sometimes we put weight and expectations on our spouses that's not fair.
That's true.
You know, sometimes we put weight on our spouse that only we should be carrying. Because truth be told, life will give you baggage. It's just how much is in your bag is the question. Life going, because we are a summary of our life experiences.
I think,
Right.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
Go
off,
ahead.
but also remembering that our every test is not going to be big. Like, I feel like with what we're talking about is um, being Muslim and Christian, and that was a big divide at one point. But every marriage is going to have some things that can divide. You know, I just wanted to say that, like, this might be our story, but every marriage is going to have something that can divide
Right.
your commitment to each other.
And so it puts into a completely different context what it means to say for better or for worse.
Right.
You don't know what form worse will take on.
That's true.
So I give you the last the closing statement. Maybe you can close us out.
Well, thank you. If you have been on here at any point, and I pray that everybody got something from this, and that you can continue to be encouraged and inspired by not just maybe our example, but other examples that of marriage, and that we will continue to grow as well.
Right.
And
we're still growing.
Right.
Even after 14 years, and length does not always equate to healthy, so you have people that have been married for a long time and that may be struggling as well. So
and knowing that they're not alone.
Knowing that you're not alone. Everybody has gone through some level of difficulty in their marriage. Stick it out. Truly stick it out. And I know I said I was going to get the last word. I'm sorry. I'm talking. But
well, we did also say that you're the more extroverted person. So,
but truthfully, walk in oneness, walk in empathy, choose to love, choose to be patient, choose to walk in oneness. All right, family, that's our time. Thank you so much for watching us. I'll be posting this on the Ubuntu Fellowship Facebook page as well. And I hope that you got something from this. To all the married folk out there, be encouraged. You are not alone. Keep going. Choose to love. Love never fails. Until the next time, family, God's peace be upon you always.